The main goal of Pan-Africanism is to challenge the major activities of European imperialists like the slave trade, European colonialism, and also racism. It was an ideological response to the 1885 Berlin Conference. And heads of state like Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, and Julius Nyerere, as well as scholars like Marcus Garvey, had played critical role to the Pan-Africanism cause. However, their dreams have not been fully met yet. And this generation is expected to do a lot in order to serve the dreams of those founding members of Pan-Africanism. A very warm welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is ETV Special Edition, and I'm Santayo Tamrat with this edition. With this edition, I'll try to focus on the recent first ever Pan-African Youth Conference held in Ethiopia. And my guests today are Alamayo Seifa and Mika Chavala. Mika Chavala from Tanzania and Alamayo Seifa from Ethiopia. Thank you so much for joining me, Alamayo and Mika.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, would you just give a brief introduction of yourself to my audience?
My name is Alamayo Seifu. I'm a legal and policy consultant and also the Continental Task Force coordinator of the first African Youth Leaders Summit. Thank you.
My name is Mika Chavala. I'm from Tanzania and I'm the founder of Swahili Nation One Africa Foundation. And it's a pleasure to be here again in the country I love and to meet with my fellow Africans.
Okay, that's really nice. The 4-day first ever Pan-African Youth Summit Ethiopia hosted was concluded, and how did you get that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Santayo, for once again for having me. The first African Youth Leaders Summit, which was just concluded yesterday, it began on the 29th of October at the African Union Hall. You know, as an organizer, you know, one of the organizing member, and as it is the first time summit, there were a lot of things that you learn as a learning curve, and there are a lot of things that you take away at the end of the day to make it very good for the second round of the African Youth Leaders Summit, which I hope we will do it in the next year.
Okay.
So from the very beginning, you know, like organizing and bringing all African brothers and sisters from 42, we expected from 55 African countries. We just did the invitation to all of them, but having 42 countries representatives, two young people from each African country, it was overwhelming for us. Okay. So it was really wonderful. We have discussed a lot of things which are very relevant and timely for the continent of Africa and for the Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism, actually.
Okay. Wow.
And we have discussed on issues that matters for Africa, such as collective issues of Africans, not something that goes to one country. So nowadays Africans have a lot of collective issues. Sure. Africans need to act collectively on security, on climate change, and on Africa facing interferences from the another powers, if I have to say it. Africa has to get it is stable, its fair share in the global political and finance order.
Sure.
And those are the things that we have discussed on the first African Youth Leaders Summit. I hope we'll go down through it through other questions, I think.
Okay, that's nice. And Mika Chavala,
Yes, sir.
would you add more here?
Yeah, indeed. First of all, I want to appreciate the government of Ethiopia for coming with such a big initiative and inviting these young, brilliant Africans, you know, from all over the continent to come here and to just talk about what matters a lot to us, Africa. Because to us, young people, it's a matter of survival.
Sure.
Because we know that we want to prepare the safe environment for our kids and for the future generation. And if we're not going to have that, then we think like it's going to be really bad for our future. And so bringing young people to discuss about the future of the continent, it's actually the right move, because we will be here longer than the old generation, you know, if I'm not mistaken, you know what I'm saying? So that was just brilliant, and to meet and connecting with different young people from all over the continent with the same like mind. It was just amazing. I took a lot of numbers through that program, by the way.
Okay, well, that's right. So I heard there were just experience sharing moments, and what experiences were shared with regard to helping more resurgence of Pan-Africanism among the African youth population?
Yeah, there were experience sharing sessions that we had. Actually, you know, we have received from different African countries brothers and sisters, and also we share and we give what we have today, our brothers and sisters. On the experience sharing, you know, this the first African Youth Leaders Summit has been backed and initiated by His Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed. So that idea to be bought, it needs like practical actions on the ground.
Okay.
So what are the problems of Pan-African Africans? That why we didn't attain the ideals of our founding fathers, which has been started 59 years ago. We are still there. Why? I mean, there are a lot of things to do. So to sort out this, we instead of like going out of Africa, let us share among ourselves the best success stories that we have and leverage upon them. Okay. You know, we used to think that experiences are good enough to if they come from Europe or if they come from the Americas. That's not true. The best experiences that Africans have, if it is shared among ourselves and scaled up to different regions of Africa, that will work. Because we have the same culture, the same values, the same people of same color, language, and same ecosystem. If you, one of the experiences that we have shared with our brothers and sisters was the Green Legacy Initiative, which was run by His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In the Green Legacy Initiative, in just 4 years down the road, 25 billion trees have been planted in Ethiopia. So if this is taken away to other African brothers and sisters, so we are sharing the same ecosystem, it will revitalize our economy. That will make a resilient green economy for Africa.
Sure.
Africa is paying much without its indebtedness. Africa has not contributed for the climate change, but it is paying the price, you know.
Sure.
So why should we expect like the Copenhagen Agreement and convention to come through like international systems and implemented? Let us plant our trees.
Sure.
Yeah, without waiting for, as I have said, from the West, from Europe, even without waiting for money. We have trees and just breed them and then do it. This is one of the things that we have shared. And also in Ethiopia, the homegrown economy that we are doing and the institutional building with the government is doing very well. Institutions are very important for Pan-Africanism to be planted properly and passed on to the next generation. Institutions are very important. So these young people who came from 42 African countries, 2 from each of them, have got the experience sharing by visiting different federal institutions. To mention some, the Ethiopian Air Force, the Federal Police, and the headquarters of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, and the National Museum, which has inaugurated very recently. So that will, I think, give an energy for the young people to think about how they can transform all the continent, all the people in Africa, all the countries, and have one Africa, one voice in the world. As I have said, when we come down to the issues that are raised in the summit, one of the things that raised was the self-sufficiency for Pan-Africanism to be reliable ID. There should be a self-sufficiency in Africa. One of the way that Africans are being manipulated is through the food aid.
Sure.
So His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed knew that we have fertile ground, land, and we have a powerful, energetic young population. So he just combined the two And then in 2 years down the road, Ethiopia has become the 18th wheat producer in the world, the second in Africa. And it is in the plan to export this wheat. So how did this came? We have discussed on the summit. It came through the idea and initiative by the Prime Minister. It is all about figuring out what we have at hand. As Africans, this is what we have to learn. So this is one of the things that we shared to our African brothers and sisters. Self-sufficiency in food will cover a lot of unfair and undue pressures. Because, you know, the great Thomas Sankara said that who feeds you controls you. So let us get out of it. We have discussed on this one. Yes.
Well, that's nice. Mika, what do you add here?
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. You know, I had an opportunity last week to visit. I went to Adama to visit the wheat production because I wanted to create a little documentary about the success story of wheat production in Ethiopia. I heard when I was back in Tanzania, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go there to see, to learn, and then I'm going to tell the world, the rest of Africa. I went there, and it was fascinating that the area that they're growing that wheat, particularly this in Adama place, it used to be, I mean, it's like Rift Valley closest there, you know, and, you know, they had nothing before, but just in the range of 2 years, they grow, like during winter, he said like 1.7 million hectares. And during other time, like over 1 million hectares, they're growing wheat. And just one region of Adama can actually feed the entire country of Ethiopia, you know, and also have excessive amount to export outside. Initiatives like this, it gives me so much hope that in Africa, we actually have leaders that are visionary, right? And they want to have a free, independent Africa. Because the other day I was having this conversation, you know, on our channel, Swahili Nation, and one debate that I was asking, are we really, Africa, are we really independent? Because when you look at everything that we have, we depend on someone else. And every time when we try to arise and to do something on our own, there's a lot of limitations. There's a lot of intervention are coming. So are we really independent? So this initiative that, for example, the government of Ethiopia is taking, and the initiative that I hope African Union will be taking in the near future, like the suggestion I gave about one, you know, passport to have, like, you know, one currency, one army, all these initiatives, they actually prepare us to be more independent. Instead of looking outside, we're looking inside, and we use what we have, you know, to develop ourselves as well to serve our beautiful people of Africa.
Okay. Well, that's nice. And what was just the overall reaction, impression of the youth towards the first edition of Pan-Africanism Summit? And what assignments did they take home?
You know, all these youth who came together, they are people who actually want to become leaders later on, to lead their countries. And it was just fascinating to have ex-leaders, people who actually govern the country, to be there to speak to us and to actually share with us what were the success and what were the failure. So for us sitting and listening to that, I think it was really fascinating. But more than that, the anger of youth, it was about, you know, that we don't just want this summit to happen. We want us to have an opportunity to actually contribute, to do something, because we have ideas and we feel like we can actually do something out of it. So I believe all the youth, we are actually leaving out of this summit believing that there's something has to be done for us to be given a chance to actually lead and to contribute as well. And it was just amazing to see all these, you know, wonderful leaders and for what they've done, and share with us, you know, what can we do in our generation to actually correct the mistake that they were done long time ago, but also to carry on the mission that you know, our leaders are trying, you know, to do. And so that I think for me it was really, you know, fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it was a really interesting summit because you can see the energy of the young people and the passion they have for Pan-Africanism and to be free, independent country, free, independent strong voice of Africa. You know, the young people, they are very much energetic, so they were discussing all the matters which the African Union has put into the Agenda 2063. Their question is, Why should we wait for the 2063? This was one of the questions. Like, for instance, no restriction of movement for Africans among African countries. Only 8 African countries have adopted it. I think Ethiopia is one, yeah? Visa on arrival has been adopted by 8 countries. Why? What are we waiting for? Then we still need, you know, Africa Continental Free Trade Area to be implemented. You know, you restrict people and then you want to trade. This is impossible, right?
Yeah, sure.
So we came up with another Pan-African idea, which is I think so many countries have adopted, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement Service. It's a business. So let us not restrict the movement of people for us to trade among ourselves and to settle payments using the Pan-African Payment and Settlement Services. You know, the participants of the event, they are very energetic. They have wisdom, I say. They explain the conspiracies happening against African countries from some powerful Western countries. They know the in and out of the global political disorder. The only thing that our young people have to articulate now is how should we get out of this net? We are trapped in the net. African people, African nations, even though we say we are free, we are not free financially in terms of the international financial system. We are not free in terms of security in the international, including the UN Security Council system. We are not represented fairly in the international forums. Our voices is not being heard. But Africa contributed much for the global society. Much in terms of human capital, much in terms of minerals, natural resources, but we are not enjoying what we have. We are creating an enabling environment for those powerful who denied us access to those systems to benefit and use against us. And it's no more, by the way. And this is the voice of the young people who had been on this summit. So there was, you know, John Mahama, the former president of Ghana, he was explaining to us how the Pan-Africanism has been had started, and he was explaining how agony it was, you know, like the West used to bring ships to the coasts and bring people on the ships, and of the people who are on the voyage to the ship, like 20% are expected to die on the sea. It was started, the slavery and the colonialism was started like that. And now it is ridiculous that the Europeans are not bringing the ships and paying by themselves for the ship owners and carry Africans to Europe. It is us, Africans, paying for the ships that are on our coasts to go to Europe, you know. They used to come and pay to the ship owners to bring Africans to Europe, right? Now, the ships come, the ships owned by companies, and we pay to go to Europe to those ships. You know how it is changed? So that's why we are at the right moment to discuss Pan-Africanism again and root it into the new generation. And the new generation has to get it now, because, you know, the social media, the things that the global system is changing has to be immediate. It has an erasing mechanism, you know. Yeah, it creates, like, do you watch now a movie of 1 hour, or you just want to watch a 3 minutes TikTok video? Which one do you use? If you ask a teenager, he chooses to watch a 3 minutes TikTok video, right?
Yeah.
So in the process, you will lose the values that we have. So this is the time to replant Pan-Africanism, and those young people who came from 42 African countries, 84 of them, they did it, Brian.
So they took the assignments, and they also just showed this much concern that Pan-Africanism should thrive. Exactly. So if they have been just expressive, like you have said, the problems of Africa, I think the solution would be soon, because the world power is changing, shifting. currently. So with these shifts, there will be just some ideological shifts in Africa as well. And this would be a good opportunity. If African population, 70% of Africans are a young population, so they can just make changes, I guess, if they have these aspirations.
You are right. By the way, on this summit, it could be very naive not to mention His Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed for integrating, you know. The summit was really, it is, as it is motto, it is the African Youth Summit at the bridge of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. You know, it is a real bridge. His Excellency brought 17 Pan-African founders, and he awarded them the Lifetime Leadership Award for the founders of the Organization of the African Union. And he gave a very strong message to this new generation of young participants. You know, it bridged the two generations.
Yeah.
And the takeaways from the summit, there were a lot. By the way, the summit was concluded by having a declaration, and that declaration is signed by all participants. It will be a mechanism to go through institutional frameworks that we have within the continent and a diplomatic channel, and it will be sustainable. And the reinforcement of our commitments in the African Union mechanisms and beyond, and initiatives such as this one has to be revitalized and happen in many different African countries. Those are the takeaways. It is in the declaration.
Well, that's nice.
Sorry, I want to answer to one beautiful question that His Excellency here raised, that as a young people, we have to think, how can we get out of this? And for me, I think it's very simple. How can we get out of this? We need one Africa. We need one Africa. We need to have a common voice. We need to have one voice. Because right now, you can take an example of what is going on in Ethiopia and how Ethiopia is trying to stand against, you know, the Western influence. It's fascinating, but imagine if that energy will be coming from 55 countries of Africa.
Yes, sure.
Imagine if all of us, we come together, we have one passport, we have one currency, we're strengthening the economy of our continent. Because right now, in order to come to Ethiopia, I need to use dollar to change to, I need to use my currency to change to dollar, and then I come here, I change dollar to, you know, the other money. So basically what I do is I strengthen the foreign currency in my own continent. But if we have our own currency, and that's what we use in our movement across the continent, that means we are strengthening our Central Bank of Africa, we are strengthening our economy, we have one voice. Even when we demand the seats at the United Security Council, we're not demanding at one leader or one country, but as one people with the strength. And if they dare to put sanction on one country in Africa, we tell them put sanction on the entire continent of Africa, which they're not going to do. Yeah. So the pattern is going to change. Sure. As Africa, we're going to be putting sanctions on them because they need Africa, but we need one another. Take an example of what Ethiopia is producing wheat, right? That it can actually support other African countries. In Africa, when you go to each country, our land, for example, in Tanzania, we grow maize, we grow rice. In other countries, they go, for example, Madagascar, they go vanilla, right? And other countries of Africa. So if all of us, we are united, we become one. And we use our strength to produce the crops we can produce and integrate with one another, supporting one another, trading among ourselves. I'm telling you, Africa will be untouchable. There's no single food that will come from outside to support Africa, but instead we're strengthening our farmers to continue to grow and to provide for our people. That is the only way. One Africa is the only way for us to get out of this, you know, deep hole and to actually shine in the level that we are supposed to be, because we are Africans and we're meant to be like that.
Well, so maybe just one thing I would like to add on you is it's not only production. We also need some sort of processing. We have just to add value. Otherwise, just these countries, the former colonizers, again take the raw materials and what we have just produced and process it and just send back, sell back to us, taking the economy again to European countries. So this must also be reduced soon and stop it later. Well, that's nice. And my next point is at the beginning of the ideology, the Pan-African ideology, I mean, as founding fathers showed huge cooperation, robust cooperation among states. And for example, when Ghana was liberated against the colonizers, it was helping other countries to free from colonizers. And Algeria did the same. And Ethiopia, we know what we did to South Africa. We know what we did to other countries which were colonized, particularly during the regime of Emperor Haile Selassie, at the League of Nations and the United Nations Assembly also. And they were just trying to cooperate each other this way. But currently, we are not just witnessing this. And why do you think it's so, Alex?
Yes, you are right. The Ghanaian first president, Kwame Nkrumah, I'm right, right?
Yeah, sure.
Kwame Nkrumah, you know, immediately after Ghana was liberated, he traveled to Ethiopia to link with King Haile Selassie, and went to Nigeria, and he started like touching different regions of Africa, so that he knew that without Africa totally liberated, the liberation of Ghana is nothing. Still, that theory works, by the way. It works now. I mean, if Ethiopia become very successful, without the success of all African countries, it is nothing.
Sure.
That's why we say our fate and our destiny is the same among African people. So that's why also we have to work together towards our future. We have to act collectively and defend each other.
Okay.
So having said this, why is not like by the current generation is not as such committed? Imagine at that time in 1963, when the OAU was founded by our founding fathers, there was no transport communication among African countries. The air flight was very limited. Communication of telephone was very limited. Email was not there that time.
No internet.
No internet. Let alone Facebook and the Twitter and WhatsApp. There was no internet at that time. But they did it.
Wow.
Coming out of jungles and, you know, like traveling so many hours and taking time, and they did, and establish our very best institution, which is the OAU, current African Union. So why we are not having such a commitment now? I think one of the reasons that we have to bring on board all our generation and the next generation, the conspiracy of the Western against the dividing, against dividing Africans among different regions and languages and borders.
Okay.
And one of the reason, I think that's one of the reasons.
Okay.
The other thing, you know, we lack commitment. We have very better opportunities than our founding fathers, but we don't have that much commitment. The other thing, I think these two, let us get out of conspiracies of the West, and also let us be committed.
My suggestion in this is that to African leaders and those who have been leading us, do you think we have crossed the line too far? What I mean is, all the support, all the aids, everything that we've been receiving for the past 60 years after independence, have we crossed the line too far that we are at the place where we cannot come back? We cannot say, no, we want to lead by ourselves. Do we have too much debt to the point that we cannot stand for ourselves and say, like, you know what, we forget about you, we're going to work by ourselves? So I feel like the reason why right now we are not like the old days is because of course, commitment, as my colleagues say here, but also fear, the fear of backlash. That's why you see right now in Africa, you'll find maybe one leader or two leaders, they're standing strong to speak confidently against, you know, whatever that is happening against, you know, our continent. But the rest, they don't really say anything because they are scared. They are fearing that the backlash is going to be huge. Maybe we're going to be sanctioned like Zimbabwe or like Eritrea or like Ethiopia. And what are we going to do after then? But you know, when you fear a man, you cannot really go anywhere. You cannot really do anything. And so I think that's why I always say this. Nyerere said this in 1963 when he went to Ghana and they had this OAU summit. He said that without unity, there's no future for Africa. Because the future that we need, the future that we want, it begins with us being united, because no matter how many sanctions are going to be imposed in certain countries, but if we come together and we protect one another, we are going to survive. There are countries in Africa surviving, and they've been living under, you know, sanction for so long time, right? You know what I mean? And in the case that you raised before about the raw materials and everything, it's very simple. When we're united, we just demand for equal trade, because right now Africa trade more with Europe than Africa itself. But the thing is, we don't have equal trade with Europe. Like, take an example of Ethiopia. They're trading coffee, but there's no any similarity of the money that is coming from the product that is coming from Africa. But when we come together, we're in a position of demanding that, all right, now all the money that have been taken away from Africa, we demand equal trade. If you want to take our products and bring to us raw material, I mean, we're bringing to you raw materials, and you want to bring to us products, we need equal trade. We need fair trade between Africa and them. They need our product anyways. They need our raw materials. Sure. So are we really in a position of demand? Right now we don't demand because we are not coming together. We don't have that unity of demanding things together at the same time. Like, if we do have that, like, I don't know, like, I know we understand this, but if we do have that, if Ethiopia is doing what it's doing here, what about the rest of Africa? If all of us, we come together, we join our hands, just like our forefathers, they fought against colonialism.
Yeah. Okay. I think just we are running out of time, and let me just, you have just mentioned a lot of issues like the Western influences, interferences in Africa's political, cultural, and economic affairs. One thing is just through trade, and we know that whatever quality car Africa produces, it is not just to be sold in the Western world. We know this, and so they don't want just us to process and to value add on our products. They want it raw, and just it is a sort of economic colonization, I guess. And let's just be specific and short, brief to the next two questions. And what should African youth population need to do in order to stop Western reviving colonial sentiment, proxy colonization, information warfare kind of things? Because we heard recently from Joseph Borrell of the European Union that they are just, the Europeans are to colonize again the Africa and their former colonies. And what should this African population need to do in order to stop these sentiments?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I really, it's really sad, and I wonder that for that statement of Joseph Borrell, the African Union as a continental entity of the black community did not give any reply on that tweet. And for me, it is an insult for Africans, and we have an institution. I expected that an institution would give a response to that, a reply to that, but it didn't happen. Anyways, we have a proverb in Amharic, right? It says, if the problem or the sickness of a man is found, the solution will be easy. So for Africans, I think the first thing is let us get to know our challenges, our problems. I think now the young generation, the new generation is very brave. They knew it. So the solution is coming for me. As I have said, there are so many things. I explained it in something in a net. We are in that kind of trap. But we can find a way, and one of the way is strengthen this Pan-Africanism with institutions. I believe, like the economic integration of Africa, the intra-trade that my friend was raising, can only happen through institutions. One of those institutions is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. For the payment settlement, he said he brought Kenyan shilling to the bank in Nairobi, then he changed into dollar, he came to Addis, then he changed into birr. But the Pan-African Payment and Settlement Service, it's a big institution, it will solve this. So we have such kind of Pan-African institutions, let us scale up it. leverage, more institutions has to come in, and then that will solve our problems, I think.
Okay. Well, that's nice. And Mika?
On my side, I think young people, we need to enrich ourselves with knowledge and skills. If you don't have computer skills, make sure you get computer skills. If you don't have knowledge about business administration, get that knowledge, because you don't need to go to university to get this knowledge. This knowledge these days, in the age of internet, you can get everywhere. This is the preparation. We need to be prepared for the war that is about to come. And the war that I'm talking about is not this war, but I'm talking about, you know, knowledge war, like mindset war, like IT and all this stuff war. We need to be enriched so much with knowledge and skills, so that as we begin to produce ourselves and to, you know, to work by ourselves, we may have the huge population of people, young people, who can actually run these things. Instead of looking outside, we'll look in the inside. So instead of spending your time on TikTok, spending your time on Instagram videos, spend your time by enriching yourself the knowledge and the skills for the preparation of the better future of Africa.
So this is a sort of just lesson that you need to give for the African population, young population particularly. But also we must make sure that this sort of knowledge, this sort of experience, and also the very ideals of Pan-Africanism must be institutionalized, as you said. And one of these institutions must be universities, schools, so that a very robust foundation would be laid among Africanists. Thank you so much for joining me, and I think just we will try to have more conversation on such issues next. Mika, I know that you will come to Ethiopia recently.
Yes.
And I will just find you and just will dwell on such issues more. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
Dear viewers, this has been the conversation with Alemayo Seifu from Ethiopia and Mika Chavala from Tanzania. We talked on the first ever Pan-African Youth Summit, and we also just tried to raise issues like emancipating the African continent from the political, cultural, and economic colonization, and the role of the young people in doing so. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm Santayo Tamrat with this special edition, and see you another time.